Hello and welcome to Serious About Rugby League's first podcast. This is a bi-weekly show hosted by myself, Sean Evans, and my good friend Daniel Senior.
Hello.
This week's show is going to include all the big transfer news, predictions and even some breaking news hot off the press this morning. But there's a lot to get into, so we're going to jump straight in. We're going to start with the preview of the Super League and some transfer news from the off-season. So I want to start with the Warrington Wolves. They have improved massively, in my eyes anyway, and the big name is Ben Murdoch-Masila from Salford. What impact do you think he's going to have in the next season?
I think obviously it's been all change at Warrington, hasn't it, since Tony Smith was replaced, and I think there could be a real outside chance, especially with Murdoch-Masila coming over from Salford, 2017 Super League Dream Team, big Tongan second rower, so got age on his side as well, 26, got plenty ahead of him, and he's been in fine form for the last 2 years since he joined Salford, and I can only see that improving an exciting Warrington team. I don't know what you think.
But since the World Cup, he has been a hot topic. He's not even just in England and Australia as well. I mean, a few clubs that were looking at him, despite the fact that Warrington had already signed him. So yeah, I think that is a big plus to an already impressive pack that was at Warrington. I mean, that with the likes of Bryson Goodwin and Mitch Brown, Lewis Johnson, the young lad that they signed from Castleford Tigers, it looks a really, really strong outfit for me. And obviously looking to improve on what was a horrendous start to last campaign and not really what any Warrington fan would have wanted.
I think they can only improve on last season, can't they? Especially there was some departures. Ashton Sims obviously gone over to Toronto, but if they can build on that with a new coach and some fresh faces, then there's no reason that it's always their year, but maybe it's the outside chance this year that top four
could actually be there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Another big name that come over to the Super League from Brisbane Broncos this year, gone to the Catalan Dragons, gone to South France, is David Mead, off the back of an impressive World Cup. And again, a lot of these players that we're talking about are ones that have come from the World Cup and are impressed at the World Cup. So David Mead, explosive player, played at fullback for PNG, but can play at centre, can play on the wing. So it's the kind of player that Catalans like to have, the utility player that moves around. Hopefully that improves a Catalan team that underperformed last year, and the big signing of Mickey Makilorum at the end of last month, which came from nowhere from many people's point of view. A strong team being formulated at Catalan Dragons.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a bit of a theme with these Papua New Guineans coming through after the World Cup. Obviously, Skipper had a great World Cup, like you say, plays all across the back line, so being able to have that utility player in your back line, in your side, really helps, especially being able to build the team around him. And massive coup coming over from Brisbane Broncos over to Catalans especially.
I think the impressive thing with Catalan Dragons is that they've not really lost anybody that you would sit and say, wow, that's a massive loss. I mean, Thomas Bosk, been a great servant to the club, but I don't think it's a massive loss. Luke Burgess didn't really perform whilst he was at Catalan. Richie Myler's gone to Leeds. You could argue that's a bit of a loss, but I feel like they've got enough strength in that area to cover those positions, and the people that they have brought in then really look like they're going to make a big difference. So it could be a good season for Catalan.
Yeah, again, another one like Warrington, aren't they? They were so close to going down into the Championship, which I think could have maybe spelled the end for that sort of experiment. I don't think it ever would have recovered from the Championship position, being alongside Toulouse and Toronto in that league. But
yeah, I don't think it would have helped anybody to have both Toulouse and Catalan in that division.
Big turnaround to be able to get a signing like that, though, just before the season starts.
Definitely. And the last transfer that we're going to talk about is a more recent one again. Stanton Albert, another PNG player. Impressive World Cup again, and it just feels like a recurring theme for most of the big transfer news. He joins the Widnes Vikings. Now Widnes are already being talked about as the club that are going to struggle this year. They're not going to really progress anywhere near the level that you would want them to as a local, like one of the clubs from the M62 corridor as such. Maybe, just maybe, with signings like Albert, I know his brother's there as well, big pack, maybe that drives them through and helps them retain Super League status at least.
They're almost nailed on, I think, to be in that bottom four battle, aren't they, with Hull KR and who knows, you could put in those other two, but yeah, a big prop forward would be helpful. They haven't recruited badly, but I still don't think they're there or thereabouts. They were an exciting team, weren't they, a couple of seasons ago, and they've just kind of stagnated that progress, and they've not really pushed on. It's a bit disappointing from the youthful side they had, and it's not really worked out for them, has it?
Not at all. And I feel like they tried to do the right thing. I mean, Dennis Betts is a great coach, and I don't think it's down to his doing.
No.
At all. But yeah, it's not really happened at Widnes, unfortunately. And who knows? Like, I mean, obviously they might be able to jump out of this and really push on to the next season. But it's all ifs and buts, and we're all going to have to wait and see with Widnes and hope the best for them. But it's not looking too positive. But again, Stanton Albert is a big player, young player, a lot of time on his side, and had a really good World Cup. So you never know.
Yeah, I think he'll want to prove himself as well, won't we, having to take this opportunity. It's a big opportunity off the back of a good World Cup, so create that competition for places, and I don't think he'll be letting it up with any ease. And
obviously there's a lot of other big transfer news. I mean, even if you want to go over to the NRL, but for now we press on and we talk about predictions for Super League positions. How you think teams are going to play? Let's start with the league positions. More importantly, let's start with League Leaders Shield. Who's going to finish top of the pile come the end of the season?
Well, on my notes I've got 5 going for a top 4.
You've got 5 going for the top 4.
Always seems to be the case.
I have also got 5 going for the top 4, but I've got a top 2 that I think are pretty nailed on in my eyes, and I don't really enjoy admitting either of them. I'm a Wigan fan. I have top of the table Leeds Rhinos and second place St Helens, which hurts me to admit, but I do think that they're the strongest teams. Realistically, we look at the squad, we look at the coaching staff, they're the strongest teams in the competition, and I think it'll take a really, really good side to knock them off the pitch this year.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I've got Leeds/Saints as my 1 and 2. Castlewig and Hull bringing up 3, 4, 5.
Okay, so I've got a slight difference there. I've got Warrington in there. I think Hull, Warrington and Wigan are going to be the ones pressing for 3rd and 4th. I think Castleford have had a great time over the last 12 months, but I can't see a reason for that to continue. I think nobody wants to admit it, but losing Zach Erdaker is a massive loss. It may have just been a one-off at the grand final, but I was there. I was extremely, extremely disappointed with the performance that was put out there.
Yeah, it was a big anticlimax, wasn't it, after that impressive season? But you could almost see it coming. Leeds have been there, done it before.
And Greg Eden had a great season, and it just felt like he was not even in the game.
No, he peaked a little bit too early, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe just he had to play a fullback in the grand final, and maybe just drag that difference in position and not being able to create the space as well as Zach Erdaker didn't really give the wingers a chance, which is what Castleford have thrived on over the last 12 months. So I don't think Castleford are going to fall by the wayside at all. I think 5th, 6th, 7th is reasonable for Castleford this season. If they can get up there, who knows, press for 4th place, but I feel like there's a lot of stiff competition for that 4th place, and Castleford are really going to struggle. Hull FC, again, they look incredible.
Yeah.
They look really, really big, strong team, and I think Lee Radford knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, he's had plenty of time, hasn't he, now with that squad. Really impressive last season, got at Wembley again. Just fell short, didn't they? I thought they would go all the way when they played Leeds. I thought they'd beat Leeds, but I was very surprised when it fell short, didn't they?
I genuinely was the same. I thought Hull and Castleford were the picks for the grand final, but Leeds pulled it out the bag, as Leeds always do. A couple of nice signings for Hull. Mickey Pyer from Newcastle Knights as well. So they've lost Mahir Fanua to the West Tigers, which isn't great. Gareth Ellis is obviously retired as well. But I feel like there are positions that can be filled for Hull. I don't feel like they're going to rely so much on those 2 players that they're not going to be able to perform.
Yeah, they're big spots, aren't they? But they've still got plenty of other lads who can chip in. And
yeah, I feel like Super League might be a push too far. But again, a Challenge Cup run and a top 4 finish and another successful season for Hull. Let's go down to the bottom of the table. Those that are fighting for 8th and 9th. I've got 2 teams fighting for 8th and 9th. Catalan Dragons and Huddersfield Giants.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are the 2 teams that are going to be the ones that the season hinges on whether they can make that top 8 come the end of the year. The Giants had a tremendous end to the last season, but it's whether they can pick up on that form.
I think Huddersfield obviously they'll want to be in that top 8, but I don't think Catalans can afford to not be in the top 8. I don't think they can afford to be back in that qualifiers mix with the Championship clubs, because there's a real risk there if they get dragged into that and they're as poor as they were last year, then any of those 4 in the bottom 4 could definitely be dragged down into the Championship.
Yeah, I agree. I think Catalans are my pick for 8th, but I know that Huddersfield will be pushing for it. Again, Catalan's signings have been really, really strong. Even the likes of Lewis Tierney. I mean, never really played that much for Wigan. It was always a backup to the first team, but you go back to the 2016 Grand Final, he had an outstanding game on the wing for Wigan. He's always been in and out of the squad, and he's had good games, and if he can go to Catalans in a new environment and start performing on a regular basis, then they've got a young player that can see him through the next 10 years.
Be interesting to see how he works with Mead, won't it?
It will be. It actually will be. And whether Tierney goes to the wing after playing full-back on loan last year, or whether he stays at full-back and Mead moves to the outside backs. So it's an exciting Super League season. Just to throw it out there, Super League Grand Final, who's your pick?
It's anyone's game from that top four again, isn't it? But I've put Leeds in the top two, but I think they might fall short this year. I think it might be the first one where it doesn't quite come off for them with.
Do you know what? I've got the same
gone.
feeling. Yeah.
As a Leeds fan, I obviously want it to happen, and this year I went in with the feeling that we're going to do it against all the odds against Cass, but this time round I think, no, maybe Maguire going is just one push too far. It's not going to be catastrophic like when Sinfield and Lulawile left, but that one void to fill, who's going to...
Yeah, I feel like, obviously, every Grand Final that you've been in the last few years, there's been a standout player, and the standout player has always been somebody that was there from the early noughties, and they've all gone now. There's nobody there filling that role, and I think, like you said, I think it may just be a playoff burden for a couple of seasons at least, and then they'll be back on, which leaves undoubtedly my pick for Super League being St Helens.
Yep.
Which, again, I'm not happy to admit at any stage.
Hurts.
They do look the strongest team, in my opinion. I mean, Justin Otterbrook's done a fantastic job.
It's just if they can sort those inconsistencies out.
Yeah, but they've got the experience and youth in Theo Fage and Ben Barber, Matty Smith, Alex Walmsley. Really good side. Okay, let's move ourselves on to the Championship. There's not really that much to talk about in terms of big issues. However, there is some breaking news that came out this morning, and that came from the Toronto camp in Portugal. That three of the players, Dave Taylor, Fufu Moi and Ryan Bailey, have been released from the club. Now, there's not an official confirmation from Toronto at the time of recording this, but it does seem like it's genuine news.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Toronto? Is that a big loss?
I think it's three big forwards who've all played top level, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially they've helped Bailey through his UCAD troubles the last couple of weeks, and to lose all three of them, I think, right at the start of the season. They've obviously got a really strong squad anyway. The signings they've acquired are the envy of many Super League clubs anyway, with West Ham and everyone else. But yeah, it's obviously going to rock the camp a little bit because they'll have to rethink that starting 13, won't they? And
I can't say I'm too concerned for Toronto. I mean, the squad is still a Super League squad. It is a Super League squad. I'm sure we'll see in the Challenge Cup this year they'll have a bit of a run. They won't. I don't think they'll get to the final or anything, but they'll have a bit of a run that shows that they've got that little bit of Super League quality in the side. We'll see. We'll see how Toronto got. Obviously, they're my pick for top.
yeah,
Lee Centurions will put up a hard fight. And that opening fixture, actually.
interesting that they go to Lee on the first day, don't they?
Indeed.
It's a potential title decider before it's even started.
Yeah.
Realistically.
And whoever's out the block first, because I look at those two teams and I don't see them losing many games. It's good for Toronto to be playing against other professionals now. And we've got the teams like London Broncos will be strong, Featherstone Rovers will be strong, Toulouse will be strong. Sheffield Eagles have the potential to be strong, but will probably be knocked down by these other clubs. So what do you think for third and fourth? Obviously that top four is what everybody's aiming for in that league, and I've got 3 or 4 clubs.
Yeah, I've got 6 for the 4, so I've got 4 for the last 2 places, and I think you've got to put London in there.
Yes,
really strong at the end of last season. Pushed a lot of clubs a long way in those qualifiers, and I think Toulouse bottled it at the end of last season. I don't know whether they do. As someone who works at Facts, I obviously want Facts to be there, but Featherstone look really strong. Whether they can take that 4th spot over Toulouse, be a 3-way for that last spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think London will be in the top 3, and I think there's a 3-way split for that 4th. I think Halifax are the only part-time team, in my opinion, that have a real shot of that top 4. I know Batley have had good seasons in the past, but I can't see them pushing that top 4 again this year, especially when you've got 3 professional sides that all want to get there as well. So I think Featherstone, Toulouse, Sheffield, Halifax have all got reasonable chances. I think Featherstone and Toulouse are your main 2.
Yeah.
But outside chances, something always happens in the Championship that you don't expect. So
it could always come down to Toulouse's get extra game against Toronto at the Magic Weekend, that third game against the best team in the league. If they lose all three, that's an extra one that other clubs aren't going to lose.
It's true. And that raises a concept about the Magic Weekend and the equivalent for the Championship as well, but that's something we'll bring up in later podcasts, I'm sure, and get your guys' opinions on it. If we're talking about the top four, we've talked about the bottom four for the Super League. Middle eight predictions. Any promotions, any relegations, and if so, who?
It's going to be a tough competition.
It is. For the first time, I've sat at it and I'm thinking there's 8 teams there, and it's going to be a really high competition.
It's not just last year. It was KR, wasn't it? They were always going up, but this time it's 4 or 5 teams, maybe even 6, who could genuinely go up, and the Super League clubs aren't the favourites in that position. I don't know, but I feel like Toronto will have to have enough to get there.
Yeah.
The experiment has to work. They have to get promoted for the exposure it'll give the game, but it's not going to be easy with Lee, and if we say London are in there as well. There's no whipping boys in that group, as there were a couple of years ago, and Batley did well to get to the top 4, but Featherstone as well. Fax last year put some good performances, but never got a win. But this time it's going to be touch and go, isn't it? With every win's going to count. It's not going to be a blowout leader.
No, I agree, and like you said, the Hull KR were the ones that were going to get promoted. The season before, Leeds Centurions were the ones that were going to get promoted. And I feel like people will probably talk about Toronto in the same way. Toronto will get promoted, sort of thing. But not just Toronto, they're at London after the back of last year's middle eights. And Lee obviously want to get back to the Super League straight away. They don't want to be hanging around in the Championship. The underestimation of Featherstone this season, I mean, they beat Castleford on Boxing Day. I know it was a weakened team but for both sides, but it just proves that they have got that little bit of Super League quality in the team, and if it comes together at the right time for Featherstone, you never know. And I feel like realistically, Widnes are the team in danger. Hull KR and Salford, it's going to be tough. That's my opinion. It's going to be tough for the two sides. But
it's almost a level playing field in that middle eights, because there's not too much disparity between Hull KR and Lee. They're effectively the same team, aren't they? They've got the same sort of assets available to themselves.
Next is our segment that we're going to include bi-weekly called Off the Field, and that's talking about all the issues that have happened away from the playing field. Obviously we've already mentioned the breaking news coming out of Toronto, but other news in the off-season, and there's some big news in the off-season. We're going to talk about stadium enhancements, because that's part of our fans focus section at the end, but there's been a lot of talk in Wakefield's stadium plans advancing and some confirmations. Wakefield club seem happy to say that it's going to go through, it's going to happen. That's good news. It's needed, I think, especially at Wakefield, and hopefully that does follow through. But the one thing I want to bring up, whilst we've got you here, obviously you work for Halifax, so news came out that Halifax won't be travelling to Toronto this season, and I'm still a little bit confused by it. I don't know what's happened. I know there's not been much spoken about it. I don't know if you know any extra details that we might not know. No,
I don't think there's not really been any dialogue. Obviously, it's meant to be the first. Toronto are obviously going to play all the away games, aren't they, in one cluster to start with, and the first home game back in Canada was going to be the 28th, but for whatever reason, I honestly don't know why. But like you say, they've cancelled that trip. So where they're going to play it in the UK, I don't know. But it almost, we're talking about Toronto a lot, but it almost feels as if it's maybe failed before it started. They played a couple of games over there last year, didn't they? Did Doncaster go over there?
There's quite a few teams, but I think they played quite a few games, definitely.
Yeah, but it just seems a bit of an anticlimax to get that in place, and then it all falls apart months before the season, not weeks, but more disappointing for the Fax fans as well, I think.
Exactly, that's my point. I think
they're paying for everyone to go over, aren't they? So if
they're paying for the clubs.
You're the ones to miss over. You're the ones to miss out on that opportunity.
I think the important thing to point out is that Toronto have the money
they do
to provide for these teams, and they are doing so. There comes a problem with fans travel and stuff, and whilst they're still in a league that has semi-professional teams, is it a viable option? And this is probably something you have to think about when you talk about a possible New York team. I know there's been talk of other expansion groups in other parts of North America, but is it viable to keep them down in League One like they did with Toronto and force them to play against semi-pro teams? Because you're not going to create an atmosphere in North America playing against teams that can't come to play because they're part-timers. I mean, they've got jobs at home. So I read about the Barrow game last year. I think it was the Barrow game. And obviously that was the big top 2 clash. Some of the team couldn't actually go to the game because they had to work. So it's things like that. And I am pro US teams, and I'll talk about this later on, but I think something needs to be sorted in that area.
The locals are buying into it, aren't they? They had massive crowds last year when they were at home. In excess of 7,000, I think they were on average. And I think Eric Perez, the owner, wants some sort of Northern Hemisphere league in the next couple of years as Canadian club rumoured for 2019 as well. So it's obviously an accessible market you can work your way into. But like you said, it's right that you force people to start from the bottom in League One. But is it really a viable option? Do you risk harming the more faithful clubs who've been with you a long time, who can't compete with that money even if they're being afforded the cost and the opportunity to go over there? Can they really? Is there any point in them trying to compete because it's messing with their daily jobs? They're not professional rugby league players, are they? They're part-time labourers or whatever else they do during the spare time. So is it really a viable option, or do they need to just, I don't know what else you could do. You can't slot them straight into Super League because we saw how that used to happen, and no promotion and relegation. It wasn't really that good for the game, was it?
And then the final thing, I mean, there's a pro and a con to this, and the big pro being the introduction of more women's teams into the Women's Super League, which I think is fantastic for the sport. I think it's finally got to a stage where Super League teams are set up and thought, right, we'll promote this because it's important that we promote this. Off the back of a successful Women's Super League season last year. But we've lost a reserve grade. Now, how important is that to Rugby League? I know Rugby League has never really worked in the idea of having a reserve team the same way that football does, but is it important that we have a setup for youth players that can't quite make the first team?
Yeah, I think it's massively important. Obviously, Warrington and Hull were the big two, and who've dropped it. I think it's not pathetic, but it's poor that some full-time sides don't buy into the idea. There's sides like Halifax who run it. It costs what, 30,000, I think Sean Wayne was estimating, to run it. But you do see the benefits of it. It's better than a dual reg partnership, especially for the bigger clubs. It's better to have your own players on board, your own coaching techniques, your own staff. You know everything that goes on. You can influence it right from the bottom. And like you say, the young players who are missing out, it's definitely just a net to catch them with. Because if they're not ready to play Super League rugby by the time they're 18, 19, they're straight down into the Championship, League One, lose interest, and they drop off altogether. And I think that's why in the NRL you see players making their debuts early to mid 20s in some instances, because they have that the reserve to fall back on, or they go elsewhere to look for
and the
rugby.
reserve grade in Australia is massive as well. That's fantastic to see for the sport, but for some reason in this country we never really have caught on to the idea of having a reserve grade or the importance. I mean, we have the academy, which is fantastic, but that's dominated by Wigan, because Wigan have famously always had this academy that just wins, and that's straight through, that's from 16 to 19. So like Wigan just seem to be the ones on top. But surely it'd be important to have a reserve grade for those players. I don't know, it seems a little bit disappointing, that's all. After last season and everybody really being pro reserve grade, and then all of a sudden it's just dropped off, and the reaction from pros themselves seems to be one of a bit of disbelief. I mean, I hope in years to come there's a re-evaluation of this system. We're going to move on to another segment in the podcast, and that's the NRL nugget as such. And this is like, we're only going to pick one or two stories from the NRL every week. Obviously, it's not started yet, same as over here. So we're going to pick our Premiership winners. We're going to sit here and put our necks on the line, like we do with Super League, and pick our Premiership winners. We won't worry too much about the table in depth, but who is going to lift the trophy?
Well, like I said to you yesterday, whoever I pick's definitely not going to win it. So it's hard to look past the Storm. Obviously, they've lost some personnel. Same with the Roosters as well. Obviously massive, but outside bet, Cowboys, first and last year. Is it going to happen
the
from
Cowboys
another time?
Got
Got to the final last year, obviously, didn't they, from a 8th. I think to finish right on the edge of the playoffs, but it's hard to look past the Roosters, I'm going to say, this year.
You're going to go for the Roosters?
Yeah.
I think the Roosters and the Storm are the two that you'd look at if you're a betting man. You'd go. They're the two that are your best bet. My prediction rests on the shoulders of a young lad, and that's because I'm going to back Parramatta. Gone from not making the top 8 in a few years to making the top 8 to get into good positions within the top 8. I mean, they lost to Melbourne last year, and Melbourne went on to win it. So all this and buts, but I feel like if Mitch Moses has a good season, Parramatta have a good season, and the Premiership's possible. And that brings us on to our last segment, and that's Fans Focus. This is something that we're going to try and bring in, and probably the most important part of the podcast, because it gives you guys a chance to answer some questions that we put out beforehand, and we'll react to your comments, and we'll try and get as many people mentioned as possible. So, our first question was, good or bad advancements in US teams? Okay, so these franchise teams that are going to start being talked about more and more over the course of this season, especially the New York one, has been spoken about a lot. Is it a good, is it a bad thing? Posted this on our Facebook page, and the first comment back was by James Bridge, who is a Lee Centurions fan, and he thinks it's a bad idea to have US teams in the RFL competitions because of the travelling needed. We spoke about it earlier, the travel needed to get across the Atlantic, basically. Part-time clubs, again, a problem when they're playing in lower leagues. So, are you with James on that? Is that something that is it a bad thing because these factors are so important, or?
I'm half and half, like we spoke before. I think it's a good thing to have the American teams, but obviously it's not without its problems, and the travel and the financial issues are those main problems, I think. But I think it needs the American teams. It needs something different to be able to progress, because Catalans can only take it so far as the French experiment, along with Toulouse. So if they can expand that US base and the Northern Hemisphere kind of idea, then there's no reason why it couldn't work. I'm obviously pro it because it's bringing a lot of exposure to Toronto. They've got excessive media coverage, the way they branded and marketed themselves last year was better than anyone else has done in a long time. It does kind of halt the progress of some of those part-time clubs, but they've had the chances before almost, haven't they? The amount of times they've had the top 4 opportunity in the last couple of years now. So whether Toronto and other US clubs are there, I'm not sure that it would make too much of a difference to the likes of Featherstone and Fax and Batley ever being promoted into the Super League. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at, and I feel like there's a lot of the replies that we've had, even the one I was going to pick out next, Dan Cook is a Leeds fan, and he's saying like it takes away from developing the game in England, but I think you have to be realistic in some sense. And I had a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago about Cumbrian teams, and sometimes there's just not the market to develop the game in certain areas. Scotland, for example, I spoke to a guy from Glasgow at the grand final last year, and he's always loved the Super League, always comes down for the grand final, but when we were talking, he was saying in Scotland there is no berth for rugby league, like there is no space for it. You've got football is massive, obviously, in the Glasgow area, but then it's all rugby union. Yeah. It's a rugby union dominated country, and I think sometimes you just got to admit that the best you're going to get is semi-pro, especially the situation we're in right now. There's no point pushing a game that's never going to go past semi-pro in certain areas when you've got other areas that can provide top quality professional sides, even if it means compensating for that. Again, I'm with you, I'm 50-50, and we've got a good response from you guys, and I feel like your responses are 50-50. James Beckett thinks it's a good idea, that's a Hull FC fan. There's a couple of Wigan fans that say it has the potential to be great, but whether it actually happens the way that we want it to, time will tell. Time will tell. Our second question was grounds. whether it's needed or is it necessary to have enhancements in grounds now. It's 2018 and we still have to go to place, and this is no offence to those particular clubs. I enjoy going there on away days, I enjoy going to every ground on away days, but Wakefield, is it fit for purpose? Castleford, is it fit for purpose? My answer honestly would be no. Carol Wilson has commented saying, she's a Warrington fan, commented saying that there's 2 Super League clubs definitely, and I think I pointed them out, to be honest. I think they're the 2 that everybody talks about in those situations that need to improve the facilities, turnstiles, toilets, just little things. I mean, I went to Castleford last year and there's a massive queue waiting to get into the ground, and we had so many problems at Castleford. And again, this is no fault of the fans or the club. It's just being able to provide a certain service, and whether you have the money to provide that service. And I mean, we were trapped outside because there was the tickets that we'd been given weren't the same tickets as they were expecting us to have and stuff. I mean, in the end, John Bateman was injured at the time and he was going in with his mates and he had 2 spare tickets, so he just gave them to us. That's how we got into the ground. I feel like there's a certain service that needs to be provided, and those 2 clubs can't provide it because of the facilities they have. Once that's improved, maybe the game looks better, just from an outsider's point of view. I'm not sure.
Atmosphere-wise, it's there, isn't it? Castleford and Wakey are fine, but it's like you say, those facilities. The pitch is fine. They're perhaps unfortunate in the way that clubs like Hull and Wigan, with their shared football stadiums, perhaps make it look worse than it is. They perhaps glorify the state of some of the stadiums in Rugby League. Obviously, Leeds are having theirs renovated. Huddersfield ground share, don't they now? Got an even better one with Premier League football. Saints have had new renovations. Lee have all had new renovations. So if they want to catch up, obviously they need to update it. But you just don't want it to be to the detriment of the atmosphere. You want to still keep that. But like you say, when you see it on TV, it looks like they're all just crammed in one corner, and it's not obviously ideal conditions for travelling fans or the players, I imagine, in the change of facilities and stuff. The question is, does it really affect their bottom line? Are they willing to sacrifice in other areas to improve one aspect of the game? And at Wakefield it looks perhaps like they are. Castleford, I think after last season it's almost been brought to the forefront with how good they were last season, that's kind of come as a repercussion that now they're in the limelight. Everyone knew the stadium wasn't up to scratch, but maybe now that they're at that stage that it's sort of thought, well, you're one of the front runners in English Rugby League, and perhaps there should be a better advert for the standard of the stadium in the game as a whole, whether you should match the likes of Leeds and Hull and Saints and Wigan with the infrastructure they've got built in with the stadium and the system.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to leave it there for this show. Thank you to everybody that's messaged in, commented, replied on all platforms. This show was obviously, there was so much to go through because of such a busy off season. So hopefully as the weeks go on, this doesn't seem as clustered and it's a bit more free flowing. We want to hear from you guys and the reaction that you guys have to this podcast. So please leave a comment on the video, below the video. Leave a comment on our Facebook page or on our Twitter, and let us know what you want to hear, what questions you want to ask, how you want to get involved. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.